Namaste, Assalamu alaikum, Shalom, Bir, Pranam, Satnam, Ni hao, buenos días, buenas noches, Hitchi, Konnichiwa, Sabadikrab, Esh, Agape, Aquaba, Velkomin. What up, though? Bismillah ar-Rahmani ar-Rahim. Allah wabha. Dao ka dao, fei chong dao, min ka min, fei chong min. Ja, Rastafari. Deus noster qui es in cielo, santo facito nomen tuum. Vaheguru Satnam. Baruch atah Elohim, Eloheinu melech haolam. Amen. Kyrie eleison, Siva Mastu, Save Jigatehim, Sabe Sata Bhavantu Sukhitata. Vagabiyam. Aquaba upendo na amani, fakiri inesanami, cinta damperami, nebavme, umenjaga. Ubuntu, shabana fakitka. Session, Kamasunida, Domo Arigato, Pilama Yellow Wakantokan, Tokadoka Shingun, Gomenagan. God, we thank you for all that you bless us. Ata Jamia Yat Afanami. Bado, Aho, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti, Amen. This is a night journal of the day journey. Life journey. It is a little bit after midnight at the moment. I just offer Isha and Maghrib. And as I prepare for rest, as is natural, typical, thoughts of the next day's to-do list continue, and as well as reconciling of today's experience, the past day's experience. Earlier this past day, I have a conversation with kinfolk wherein I am asked, what is the end objective? What is the final objective? And the conversation continues, addressing a specific circumstance at that moment. But it's a beneficial question, but I also recognize that it's a typical question for those who are trained in management life, and additionally, what's the purpose of this? What's the final objective? What's the reason for doing this? Final objective. But when something is asked to me, or kinfolk like me, there's always that existential kind of like pause and consideration, depth, and like, yo. So, that being said, what is revealed to me in simply cognitively responding to that question is that there's no final objective. I've already reached it. I've attained the final objective. You can say moksha, you can say teshuva, and what have you. However, whatever label you want to put on it, I have it. And I'm no better, no worse than anybody else. But I'm without a final objective at this point. The final objective is unity. And once we attain it, it's simply a matter of maintaining that. So that's where I'm in life. It is simply a matter of attuning myself with the cycles, day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, the rotation of the earth, the orbit of the earth, and further, the seasons, and there it is. So the continuing objective is simply to optimize the well-being of the life around me. That being said, there are still things that I'm guided to do that have yet to be done. Being in this life, continuing in this life, sharing the well-being in this life, and bringing in new life, partnering with those who share this understanding, this walk, this trod, and being married, having children, and bringing new life into this walk. It is other than a final objective, because when does that stop? It's simply the continuing objective, and so it's not linear. It's understanding the cycles, the circularity, and the spirals, because the circularity continues in a linear projection within our temporal consciousness, but recognizing just like the fluidity. So that's what that is one thing that to share with me today. Additionally, simultaneously amidst this, somewhat distinctively, at a different point of the day, but then again, all of these things coalesce. I also recognize I've reached my peak in life, 48 years old. According to the statistics, I've lived the majority of days that I can expect to live on this earth. I may live 50, 60, 70 years. I may live 50, 60, 70 seconds. But recognizing that it's a different perspective. It's a different awareness. It's a different responsibility. It's a different status in life. And it is new to me. It could be said I've been that way since 40, since 35, 35, 40, or further, but still, I'm absorbing that now, particularly amidst my marital experience and further. So what that provides to me is, the physicality. Like I'm most likely going to be a professional athlete, and that might sound preposterous, but that's something that's very significant for kinfolk like myself growing up, at least 30 years ago, 40 years ago. I've dealt with that prospect of being other than a professional athlete for over 30 years, so that's not a big deal. But the physicality of it becomes increasingly pronounced, recognizing that even pickup games and this, that, and the other, got these gray hairs, and so my role is different. I'm different than the lead player on the team or whatever. I'm increasingly the coach, the Roger Mila coming in as the late minute substitute. Anyway, point is that my role is different at this point. Still have many capabilities, still can play, still can do them other things, but what I add most to the table collectively within our village and clan and diaspora and societal experience, civilizational experience, is different, and it's beneficial to recognize that. So also earlier this day, I share a scenario of the narrative from the rivers about the migration. This is insight provided from Sangha Yosef, the collective of kinfolk, mixed colored Rastas, who continue to dream. And there is much insight, one can call even revelation, that continues to be shared, that has yet to be shared through this experience of Sangha Yosef. It's continually unfolding. And as I recognize my adjusting role within life, what I contribute, what I bring to the table, not just for kinfolk in this lifetime, but what my, I don't want to say legacy or my posterity, but the work product of this trotting that I share. What is optimal? Doing these joints, or writing, or talking in person. I'm still working out the optimal methodology with that, because it's a matter of what's needed at this moment. It's a matter of what's needed continually for generations, for the next 7 generations and further, Elohim willing. It's a matter of what's available amidst the conditions. To be honest, I'm looking at this may be my last computer, just given where my progression and my guidance is in this life at the moment. So again, if I'm looking at this experience, what can I expect to be able to do, or be available to do in this part of the trajectory, and providing that. I spent much of this process amidst my studies, and additionally sharing things, recognizing that people aren't ready for it, and just putting it out there so that when people are ready for it, there it is. That's been much of my methodology for the first, well, I should say for the past 20 years. Along this path, particularly within the past 5 to 10 years, people are increasingly receptive. I'm not trying to be popular. I ain't trying to be celebrity. I ain't trying to be a renowned guru per se, or whatever else. That's not the final objective. I'm guided to share what the guidance that is shared with me. So again, that brings us back to Sangha Yosef. And the thing that I am guided to share at this moment is what Sangha Yosef is. It's preferable, as I've communicated previously, to share these types of insight during the day. Daylight, it's a different energy. It's not against the divine order to have discussion at night. Some of the deepest spiritual, religious conversations occurred in the dark energy. I mentioned a while ago that we don't do our best thinking at night. That holds true. I stick with that. But it's, when I say best thinking, it's a matter of making decisions about this temporal experience, deliberating and discriminating. I also mentioned in that same delivery that in the nighttime there is a creativity. There's an openness of thought when the minds around us are asleep. The consciousness is increasingly invited for pontification, and so that type of cognition, if I'm just going to find some other way of saying thinking, there is a benefit. Any time of day is available for that type of spiritual cognition, we'll say. So anyways, that's my disclaimer for sharing this at the moment. It's still preferable to share during the daylight hours before the moment. What I recognize is that this is going to be with me again as previous occasions. That this churning of the mind is going to be with me until I share it, and then I'm further prepared to rest and continue with the next day, Elohim willing. So that is what I'm doing here after 15 minutes. So Song of Yosef, what it is. I mentioned it being we are mixed colored Rasta. I've shared a number of writings about this. I've shared it is appropriate to show this. I've shared a number of introductions and at this moment, this is the joint of reference, introduction to Song of Yosef. This pretty much lays it all out, and I've made it available on the website. I'm not plugging whatever, but I'm just saying it's out there. So I'm not going to get into like the mechanics of Song of Yosef, about what we do, what our philosophy is, what our theology is, what our practice is. All of that is articulated specifically within that, and there's so many further details to build from that as well, but it's pretty much well covered in that introduction, that booklet. So what I share here is like, so okay, actually I can't even say what I'm sharing. I'm just going to say what it is. This is what I look for throughout my life as a mixed colored kinfolk, but just as a spiritual striving from an early age. I've written notes about what I'm articulating here, and with as I do that, instead of just it being like a freestyle kind of testimony, it becomes increasingly formulaic, because what I begin doing is identifying the different stages of my life: elementary school, middle school, high school, university, business school, work, law school, and then the spiritual path, interfaith movement, and then saying how Song of Yosef is what I look for in each of these stages of life, which is something distinct in each of these stages of life. So what I'm guided to share at the moment is the verbal articulation of that, again, for it to be increasingly fluid, and like relaxed and genuine and heartfelt, but at the same time building on that kind of like formula of looking at each stage of my life. So if it sounds somewhat rehearsed or whatever, it's because I've already written some of this down already. So that being said, I'm just going to share what it is. So from early stage, not the earliest, but from early stages, when I start like looking for something in life, and thinking about things, I can look back to elementary school, early elementary and particularly late elementary. And what I remember particularly is just looking for stories of people like myself, that look like myself, that look like my family, that look like the people around me, and that are acknowledged by my teachers, that are respected by my teachers and valued by my teachers, and shown to my classmates, that look like my classmates, and additionally. And so didn't see much of that, and didn't have the knowledge, the conscientiousness or otherwise to even know that there was such a thing. And so Song of Yosef is what I'm looking for during that period, because Song of Yosef is Song of Yosef is genuinely Rasta. We come from an experience of the middle passage. Not every one of us is derived temporally, I should say. I want to say something like heritage, like not everyone's ancestors, not every one of our ancestors experiences or progresses through the middle passage, but our community, spiritual community, is founded and guided by that experience of those of our ancestors that do. Mine do. I should say many of mine do. I'm mixed, so some of my ancestors are elsewhere during the Middle Passage. But anyway, that's a whole nother, the politics or whatever, but the point is that Sangha Yosef comes from that experience. And that intentionality of recognition and learning, honoring, and building from this experience. So, particularly as this experience is negated and avoided and denied and suppressed and avoided, did I say that before, by many other religiosities of this earth. Rasta has a specific focus, Haile Selassie I, and Marcus Garvey, Nyabingi, and further. But at the same time, Rasta is also variated. There are a number of different theologies. There are a number of different cultures and practices and disciplines. And that's part of the nature of Rasta as well. It's also nascent as a religiosity or a spirituality, because again, many kinfolk don't call Rasta a religion, but it's a path. It's a spirituality, much like the terms are applied to Vedic practice and Buddha and additionally. So all that being said, because of this, there is genuine, legit, authentic space, room for the establishment and recognition and thriving of Sangha Yosef. So that's some of the temporality. There is the specific Afrocentric spirituality, and it is an Afrocentric spirituality that is intrinsically pluralistic, it's been described in many of the introductions to Sangha Yosef before, coming from Middle Eastern scriptures, narratives, and principles, Israel, Christianity, Islam, having significant influences from the East, from India, being established temporally in native Western land and mindfulness, relationship with nature, distinct Afrocentric experience, affliction, and the insight and credibility that comes from that, as well as European civilization. European civilization itself is other than purely European, but language and many of the things that come with the colonial history from which Rasta is emergent. So Rasta itself, Nyabingi, Bobo, 12 tribes are all intrinsically multicultural, just to be honest. And so again, the advent of a multicolored Rasta community is 100 legit. That don't mean we are accepted immediately. We've got to show and be for show, but that we are Rasta. And there is room for growth and discussion. In this experience, I also personally identify as Hindu, Jewish, Buddhist, Christian, Muslim, and additionally, legitimately, because I practice these things. these things, these teachings. I honor these teachings that are provided from the respective holy prophets, ancestors, and sages from the different traditions, Taoism as well. But that proclamation is other than a necessity within Sangha Yosef. I'm getting to like the details of explaining that part of it. That's not what I'm talking. That's not my purpose here. Concentration late night. So going back to what I was talking about in elementary school, looking for the stories. Sangha Yosef shares the stories of our earth, the traditional stories, the folk stories, the children's stories from around the earth, from our different cultures, wherein we find the faces, the experiences, the names, the narratives of our ancestors and our prophets and our sages. And that's what I'm looking for in elementary school, without being able to name it, and additionally. So that's elementary school. Now in middle school, we started to become increasingly knowledgeable about the earth. I remember studying current events, memorizing places around the earth, capitals, the names of the contemporary world leaders. I say world because select nations within basically northern industrialized societies. But paying attention to current events, watching news. This is nearly 40 years ago, quite a few years ago. And again, there being a limited display or a limited sharing of the experiences of the earth during that period, and studying the current events and the leaders, and additionally, and what I'm looking for is the full story, the balanced story, and the story that affirms my self, my identity, my family, my kinfolk, my family, my classmates, and additionally my community. I remember during those stages, elementary school and middle school, about studying the daily life of civilizations of Greek, particularly ancient Greece, like what each day was like, what it had for breakfast, what people did, and additionally, and that's fascinating for me. I love that. I love that's amazing. Like people actually lived like that 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago. So what about other places around the earth? What about what was going on in Africa? What was going on in China? What was going on in the rainforest in the south? We didn't get those stories at that time, and I was looking for that. What were my ancestors doing amidst the fjords, and additionally? So that's I was looking for that. Sangha Yosef. And as I mature in middle school, particularly again, as we start to learn about the earth, beginning like the politics, and additionally, we start learning about valuation, valuing ourselves, valuing others, where we fit within these valuations. And again, I'm looking for the premise that values me, of who I am, where I come from, in a fair way. Didn't find that in middle school. Looking for fair validation from teachers that value where I come from, value who I am, and receive a lot of love from teachers. A lot of valuable guidance in terms of how to perform academically, but in terms of supporting the core of who I am, where I come from, and additionally, that's comparatively absent. And that's not a slight on my teachers, but that's just the actuality. I was looking for that, and it's difficult to find. Sangha Yosef addresses that, provides it, and further. High school is when the rubber hits the road. We start to go through the puberty, many, if other than before that, um, and start to experience the prospect of life, pairing up, girls meeting boys, boys meeting girls, um, the prospect of marriage, even when that's not the actual practice, and preparing for life. How to do that? What are the appropriate ways of pursuing a relationship between man and woman, of being married, of being supportive of community, and committing to community, dedicating one's vocation for community. And additionally, when I'm in high school, I learn about the oppression, racism, discrimination, systemic, and additionally, and I gain a sense of purpose, a tangible sense of purpose that was latent before that, of just helping people and being empathetic and studying cultures and this and the other. And then when I get to high school, it becomes okay. We see this injustice. Let's speak to this. Not only that, but how I am valued, or how the community values me, is through this prospect of providing for the community. And so that begins to take hold, assert itself during that stage of my life in high school. But again, in terms of how to do that, what are the answers? All that was told during that time for me, or the message that was, it wasn't specifically directly told, but the message that I got was that we need money. We need money for school. We need money for health. We need money for housing. We need money for this, for that. And so that was just like the message is like, we just need more further money. And so I'm like, okay, let me focus on that. But that's not what we need. We need relationship, discipline, knowledge, and those things actually, well, without getting too much in that spiel, but attaining money does not provide those things. And actually, quite the opposite. The process of attaining that money leads one away from those things, because the money is emitted through the mechanics of the system that is perpetuating those injustices. And so to gain money means getting favor within the system and becoming increasingly like the system. And so in that process of becoming like the system, gaining favor, and then being rewarded with the money, one distances oneself from what one is actually needing, which is knowledge of self, love of self, discipline of self, and instead becomes attached to the mechanics of the system. And I'm not knocking things, and that's one of the things I have to work on as well, is to abstain from, or to work away from criticizing things, and be increasingly constructive, because that's one thing I observe about my some of my things from the past is like observing gripes and grievances with society, and then kind of just venting that, providing solutions often, let me tell it, but at this point, rather than like building from the deconstruction of the negative practices of the moment, simply just focusing on the constructive and being affirmational. And it's not one of the versions of that methodology is just being enveloped in kind of like the sellout role of just like focusing on positive and just starting to have that fake facade of just like everything is fantastic, blah 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 blah. So that because of that, like that, it seems affirmational, positive, but it's fake. It's not genuine. And so people in our society, in my experience, historically seem to better recognize the genuineness of a message when it is speaking to the ailments, the afflictions, and then going the next step of providing solutions. So at this point, I've done that years and years and years. But at this point, what my guidance is to focus on the affirmational, because I mentioned through the years not having animosity towards people in leadership position of the system or otherwise. I regularly say love and peace to everybody, genuinely. But at this point, like, as I'm looking at this, focusing on the negative, addressing the negative, doesn't tell people, it doesn't guide people, doesn't inspire people to do what the positive is. So I've got my badges in the cause, so I don't have to prove my authenticity of what my intentionality is or otherwise. Ain't no guarantees of people recognizing who or what I am or what I think I am. Ain't no guarantees of me staying this way. There's always this susceptibility to corruption or otherwise. But in terms of feeling the necessity of proving or staying true to the cause by articulating the affliction, yes, we address the affliction, but it's beneficial to articulate and to concentrate on the affirmation. So that's what I'm working on as I'm getting this thing. So when it comes to the community, when I'm in high school, sense of purpose, and not just a sense of purpose and commitment to the cause, but how to do that. I was very, very clueless, basically, during that stage. Just go to university, find out how to get money, bring it back to the community. And that was pretty much the formula, because few cats were doing it. Few cats were staying true to that. It's very easy to get enveloped into just the self career track of there's so many pitfalls along the way, even just getting to university, graduating, getting a job, and additionally or further, but there's so many pitfalls that prevent many people from getting that. And when the smaller percentage of people do that, get through, graduate university, maybe even get a graduate degree, or rather, again, particularly 20, 30 years ago, get a graduate degree and have like options, credentials, and jobs lined up or whatever. Even when that small percentage is able to do that, then it's very difficult to avoid that temptation and that narrowing kind of trajectory of just living a singular career for self, amassing things for myself, and then giving pittances out along the way and calling that giving back to the cause. That's what my observation of the vast majority of the career tracks, particularly from the age of high school, where that leads to. So that's all I knew. I didn't even know that. Too tough in terms of having elders to share with me like how to do things or whatever else. I had significant amount of support, but it was very general. Go to school, study, be disciplined, don't get caught up in stupid stuff particularly. Graduate, things will take care of itself. That's pretty much the guidance. So Song of Yosef provides, and I'm not trying to sell Song of Yosef, I'm just communicating this is what I was looking for. It provides a tangible solution. It's not necessary to go to university. It's not. Learning is awesome. Learning is beneficial. Learning is fundamental. But it's unnecessary to go to university to get that learning. Going to university is beautiful too, a place of learning additionally, but today a lot of the universities is kind of like a luxury cruise ship, and getting access to country club status, not necessarily providing education, and particularly the development of self, and particularly the development of the discipline of self, even the love of self. And so that's what I was looking for in high school. Anyways, I'm going to continue on with this joint. So just because I'm in it already. So this is actually where the crux of my motivation of sharing this exists, because that stage of life, high school to university, is the formative stage of life where we kind of like solidify our path generally in life. And we kind of narrow all the different options or whatever, and we start to focus on where it is, where we go in life. And that's when the guidance is very valuable. And when I personally am searching, some 30 years ago. So that's high school. And then in university, similarly, again, I'm trying to figure out what to study. My initial major is architecture. Then that was never like my intention going to. That was what I was thinking of when I started high school, and just kind of kept on saying that. So architecture. Then when my official initial enrollment at university, my major was marketing, and so I was in the marketing department, in the school of business for the first year and a half of my university. Then I changed my major to economics because I recognized that was the further appropriate field of study and discipline, at least academic discipline, to understand the systemic challenges or circumstances concerning community and upliftment. And additionally, so it's not just about money, it's about resources, land particularly, the relationship with nature. Economics doesn't teach that much, or I should say conventional economics doesn't teach relationship in that way, in that conscientious way. But that's basically what I recognized at that moment was what I needed to study was economics. So I do find a fair amount of guidance during that period. Um, uh, Interestingly enough, I'm being conversational at this point. Um, my professor who inspires me to change my major is actually a Jewish woman at an HBCU. Haha, go figure. But I just remember leaving the class and just be like, she would break down macroeconomic conditions internationally, and show how this applies to the Black experience in the United States, the disparity, and additionally, and it's just like, this is it. Okay, so again, that's because of that I changed my major to economics. However, what's interesting is that the actual economics department was all Africans and Jamaicans, so it was a very Pan-African vibe, culture, experience, guidance during my three concluding years at Hampton University, the campus of Booker T. Washington. And so I'm reminded of the Burning Spear song of African Teacher. Teacher, 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 teacher. And I was like, wait a minute, that's me. So beautiful experience there. But even then, it's focused on the conventional academic discipline of economics. So the books that are taught are the standard books of Eurocentric philosophy towards ownership, productivity, production, and consumption, demand and supply. So looking at that point in my life for an increasingly honest, just methodology of sharing, that's built from Ubuntu and the principles of Kwanzaa and additionally, and so even at HBCU with the African Afrocentric Pan-African panel of professors in my economics department still didn't have a license to go too deep into that kind of emphasis within sharing the academic discipline. So I look for that, and not just from Africa, but also from Asia, from Desiland, from Mediterranean, from Europe as well. All Europe is not imperialistic and capitalistic. So from native tradition and further, actually there's a strong history, if not necessarily well known, of native kinfolk at Hampton University specifically, but also, if I understand, at other HBCUs, because that's just the nature of the history and the experience some nearly those centuries ago. Wigwam. So anyways, all right, that's what I was looking for. Now here's the crux of it. I already knew like what school life is like. I know what it's like go to books. I know what book learning is like. I know going to class, playing, I shouldn't say play the role for the student or for the teacher, but I know what it's like to be an attentive student, to build a rapport with the teacher, particularly those that are increasingly attentive and dedicated to teaching. So I knew those mechanics, and comparatively decent in that when I had the motivation to be. But at the same time, I'm searching for beyond that, because life isn't just about book learning, and additionally, it's about life experience, um, going through trials and tribulations, proving myself as a young man. Yo, where's my spear? Let me get into this to the jungle and get a lion. Um, that necessity of like going through trials and tribulations, the trotting and showing a woman, showing my family, showing the community what I can do. Like, yo, I got heart. So a young brother needs to do that, and needs to connect with other young brothers who are doing that in a righteous way, in a cooperative way, and be like, yo, all right, I got your back, you got my back, all right, let's roll. And not just a matter of like in like a gangster style, or otherwise, but like as village. So I look for that when I'm 18, 19 years old, when I pledge a fraternity. And additionally, because when I see the fraternity life, I didn't know much about it beforehand. My father is a member of a fraternity, a different one than mine. So I knew generally about it, but he wasn't very active in his adult life. I knew about it, but it was something of a distant experience. So when I'm introduced to it up front at university, I'm like, okay, this is the closest thing I could see to people being serious about something. I saw NAACP, I saw the church groups, and additionally, I wasn't convinced about that. And I saw like the politics of like ascending in the hierarchy of the school itself, being cozying up with the administration, getting the job offers, and additionally by knowing the president or knowing the different deans or whatever else. And I wasn't convinced about that. I had already read at least the first part of The Invisible Man, and I was like, yeah, I see where this is going, or where I see where this could likely go. So I wasn't convinced about that. So the fraternities were something that was like, I saw School Days, and so I knew about that part, but I didn't see DAP at Hampton University, probably to be expected. But I didn't see the activists. I didn't see the people who were conscientious, who knew what was going on in the world, and were forthright in articulating that. Didn't have that too much at Hampton at that point, at least. So the closest thing I could see to people being serious about something and like proving oneself and addressing that manhood kind of experience, that manhood experience of trials and tribulations, of brotherhood, of collective kinship, and further, fraternity was the closest thing that I could see at that point to that. So I do that. And there is that. There's a strong element of that, but at the same time, what I recognize in going through the process, and being a member of the fraternity, being an officer of the fraternity, and connecting with other beautiful brothers from around this nation, and even around the earth, what I recognize is the limitation within the fraternity as well. It's increasingly a social organization. It's basically Christian, but it doesn't present itself outrightly as a Christian organization. But because there's a certain limitation in terms of the fraternity doesn't get into spirituality and religion outright, and I need that at that stage. I look for that. I search for that at that stage. I search for a spiritual journey and spiritual answers, and for pledging in a way that is spiritual, not just physical, not just monetarily or materially or whatever else, or socially, but like comprehensively, like all out pledge. And so I was looking for spiritual community, and pledging spiritual community, belonging within spiritual community. And so again, what I'm looking for during that stage of my life is Sangha Yosef. That's university. I go to business school. And my path becomes increasingly focused on career. I shouldn't say career, but advanced academic understanding of conditions. I go abroad. I study overseas, England, Manchester. Meet kinfolk from around the earth. And life-changing experience, beautiful experience, and very beneficial, very appreciative of that experience. What I also look for, though, is, again, a spiritual connection of it's a beautiful thing to meet people from other cultures, to have the stories, to like connect, socialize, chop it up informally, get to know people, get to know their stories. It's a sacred thing. And what I searched for during that period, to be honest, I don't know if I could have absorbed any further than what I absorbed in that experience, at that moment, at that stage of my life, coming from where I was coming from. But what I genuinely look for during that period, without even knowing it, is, again, the spiritual connection. So it's not just a matter of connecting with kinfolk from around the earth who are different and learning the experience, but delving deeper into the heritage and ancestry and spiritual guidance, and additionally, and ain't having too much of that in business school. People are focused on business, and I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying that's different than what I was specifically looking for. And each of these experiences, elementary school, middle school, high school, university, business school, and further, as I'm going to get into this, God willing, I'm very humbled and appreciative of each of these experiences, of the kinfolk that I connect with, who guide me, who listen to me, and who I help guide as well. I treasure that. I just recognize I'm looking for something further at this stage of life. And I say that because I know at this moment there are kinfolk at each of these stages of life who are also looking for that at this very moment. And so that's a significant reason why I share this in this way. And I don't think this is, again, I'm not trying to sell this. I don't think I'm necessarily doing a fantastic job of doing that if I was trying to do that. But I'm just articulating this. So, how much it's worth to whom it's worth. When I'm in business school, that's what I look for, again, spiritual. And again, it was, my experience overseas was just overwhelming in many ways. So it's difficult for me to even perceive being able to absorb anything further than what I already do. But what I can say is, fast forwarding a little bit and gleaning from some experience from my interfaith path after I graduated law school many years later, or a few years later, in these past 20 years of interacting with religious leaders, religious practitioners from many different traditions, going to many different conferences, and additionally, that's the kind of conversation I was looking for when studying overseas. That's the kind of conversation I was looking for in high school. And I didn't have the background to have that conversation. I didn't have the knowledge at that point in high school and university and business school, even up through law school. Didn't read the Bhagavad Gita at that point yet. Had yet to read the Torah or the Gospels, or additionally. So I wasn't prepared to have that conversation, but I was looking for that conversation. So, again, overseas, England, meeting kinfolk for the first time from around the earth, being for the first time overseas. Awesome experience, and I look for further. Come back, finish business school, go on to work with Amnesty International, and I've articulated this before. Amnesty International, that's basically my one conventional job. I worked for. Actually, this is in the writing. I'll backtrack, perhaps, God willing, after I articulate Amnesty International. I basically had two jobs, conventional jobs in life, but even that's open to discussion and interpretation. But the one job I have after graduating from business school, I work for Amnesty International, a human rights organization. And beautiful experience again, and where previously I interacted with people from all around the earth in business school who are preparing to work in corporations and this, that, and the other. In working at Amnesty International, I get the flip side of it, looking at the human rights violations that the corporations are causing. And that's not shade on anybody. That's just the balance of experience. So I learned that at Amnesty International. I learned much of it at Amnesty International. I work with the children, the youth in the DC public school system. Beautiful experience. And looking back, there's so much that's done. It's somewhat amazing when I think about it. But at the same time, it's very frustrating because I think there's so much further that could be done. Knowing what I know now, such as life. But again, that's spiritual, because the youth are ready for it. The youth are like, eat it up, like, yo, what's going on? What's happening? Yeah, yeah. And then like 3-4 steps ahead, and like, whoa. I'm not ready for all that. So that's one side of the experience of working at Amnesty, at least my experience. The other side is working with the human rights activist scene, and the relationships. That is very averse towards religiosity, to be honest, averse towards much of authoritarianism, conventional authority at large, and including religion. And so the whole notion of spiritual solutions to the questions, to these concerns, is somewhat off the table, because many activist kinfolk are very intelligent, very knowledgeable, impressively knowledgeable about what's happening on the earth when it comes to the current events, when it comes to systems, and additionally, particularly from the book learning, but when it comes to spiritual knowledge of knowing like where the ordinary kinfolk who are experiencing this affliction come from, what they value and what we value, and additionally, the activists have less of a knowledge of that, can speak less to that, and can less support that because of that lack of knowledge. And I look for that, particularly at that stage of that spiritual knowledge. And less expectation of finding an Amnesty International, but particularly the notion of spiritual guidance as a solution to the afflictions that are articulated as human rights abuses. And additionally, I search for that with Amnesty. And particularly, again, within the experience of working with the DC youth, of having those solutions available to share and teach. Confuzi is hilarious, to be honest. He mentioned something. I was reading the Analects, Linyu, earlier today as well, and there's a line where he says 3 things. When the youth are immodest and non-deferential, when those who mature in life don't give back and don't provide something in return, and then when those who are old refuse to die. He says those things just irk me. Something to that effect. But that's one thing I experience now. Like I'm lightweight. I shouldn't say amazed, but there are many beautiful youth, who are very modest and deferential. But it's challenging, it's frustrating when youth aren't modest and aren't differential. Because I know how I'm raised, and even to this day, I'm differential to cats who are younger than me, just because that's a little bit excessive, and that's a little bit a consequence of oppression and conditioning. But just that culture of like, yo, respect the elders, yo. And as an elder, it's like you can't teach a youth. It's difficult to teach a youth that principle without being perceived as just being self-serving. You're just like, oh, you just want me to respect you because you want to be respected. But it's like, no, it's like that's what's up. So, anyways, modesty and being deferential as youth. But then, as again, on the part of the elders, the mature, to provide, to ride back, to give back, not just to hold it and be stingy and whatever else, but yo, give back, give it back. What you learned, give it back. So, anyways, that's what I think about working with the DC youth, of just having the spiritual guidance and knowledge, and yo, give it back. So that's what's up. So, anyways, that's what I look for at Amnesty International, that spiritual path. Sangi Yosef. Again, two further stages. Law school. When I get to law school, I look for. To be honest, I have modest expectations. My purpose for going to law school is get a law degree, have the credential, so that when I say things about the law system, there is credibility within that. I gave law, the U.S. law, an opportunity of like presenting itself and presenting its case to be practiced. And I don't mean to sound so harsh or whatever, but it didn't happen. So again, I want to avoid like just the whole trope of criticizing convention in U.S. law, but the whole of it is the sum of it is that I was looking for a spiritual law. I was looking for a heavenly law that transcends the earthly endeavors and pursuits and ambitions and motivations, and that is, at least at that point, began to years ago, it's comparatively absent from law school. Law school abstains from concerning itself with the heavenly and those esoteric proclivities. It's focused on the nuts and bolts of how the system works. So that's what I look for in law school, is that guidance, that affirmation of self, of soul, of spirit, and society from that soul and spirit. So that's what I'm looking for. Again, Sangi Yosef, and I can talk about this. Maybe that might be beneficial, like specific elements, like why it's not just like, oh, it's all in Sangi Yosef. But when I speak about law, spiritual law, I'm talking about Tobari Gokada. I'm talking about the revelation, the insight, the guidance, the knowledge, the wisdom that's provided from Torah and Bhagavad Gita and Digha Nikaya and Dhammapada and Gospels and Quran and Tao Te Ching, and the further canon of Holy Scriptures. We have 40 Holy Scriptures within that we regularly study every year during the cycle of weekly studies. So there is law, there's guidance, there's discipline, there's order, there's hierarchy, there's governance that is provided within these teachings that are practiced and studied and taught within Sangi Yosef. So that's what I'm referencing. An example like of what I mentioned with my fraternity days and like what I was looking for in that experience, the clan system, belonging to a clan, my family, my extended family, having formal relationship with other clans, so that even if we're from different clans, we're still kinfolk, and having the culture. Having the regular rituals within our clans, amongst all of our clans, having those inside stories, and that sense of belonging, that sense of responsibility, that leadership within clan, and then also within village. Those are things that I look for when I join in pledge fraternity. That we maintain within Sangi Yosef. And there's so much still to be built and established within Sangi Yosef in a proper way, but it's included within our methodology and experience. So that's what I look for at that point. So that's one of the specifics. What I'm saying when I say Sangi Yosef, it's not just a matter of like, oh, here it is, but that's part of the details. And obviously, there are further details that go into clan experience and still further details that I continue to learn and study, searching for those who do know, Haudenosaunee, Onondaga, and further. But it's not just some kind of like panacea or some ambiguous panacea of just like, oh, it's all in Sangi Yosef. But there's specific things, components within Sangi Yosef. The discipline. I also search for that, like being disciplined day in, day out, knowing what's right, what's wrong, what to do, what not to do, relationship between man and woman, respecting woman, being with other men who respect women, and supporting this culture of mutual respect, the healthiness that is gleaned from that. I searched for that for many years, since a young age, kindergarten. So that's another thing I'm referencing. Having the stories, knowing the narratives of our ancestors and prophets and sages, who show us what that relationship is, what that healthy relationship is, who show us the pitfalls, who show us like learning and redemption and forgiveness, reconciliation, and healing amidst these relationships. It's not all peaches and cream. So, but there's a fabric of support. Society, again, clan, village, community, wherein when we have our individual indulgences or indiscretions or whatever else, that we have these processes of reconciliation, of either directly reconciling with each other, coming to terms, making apologies, providing forgiveness, or getting guidance, insight, and dispute resolution through additional arbitrators, at the risk of being too technically sounding, but within the community, within the clan, within the culture, rather than just saying, "Oh, that's it, separation, go separate ways. That's it. Don't talk to each other again in life." And then all the vitriol and vengeance and all that other hurt that continues on from that lack of resolution, from that lack of reconciliation. So that's a further example of what I'm talking about in terms of the details of what is found within Song of Yosef. It's not exclusive to Song of Yosef, many of these things that I described, but particularly for people who come from an experience of mixed culture, mixed heritages, or mixed heritage, where these experiences of reconciliation across divides is less readily available institutionally, particularly systemically. This is part of the experience and guidance and calling of Song of Yosef. So again, in law school, that's what I searched for. And that's what I find it with Song of Yosef. 3 years of trotting, study, affliction, pain, joy, redemption, and all that, and continuing. So the one other stage of life of searching is the interfaith movement. After I graduate from law school, when I begin my spiritual path, when I experience acute affliction and persecution, abandonment, betrayal, and all them things. That's when I begin to study the stories of Moshe Rabbeinu and Jesus and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Arjuna, Siddhartha Gautama, Lao Tzu, and additionally, and start to see like, whoa, hold up. These are experiences of persecution and affliction. Here's our gems, guidance, light, to progress beyond these experiences, to understand, to be reconciled, and to persevere, to continue on. So that's my spiritual path that begins generally began 2 years ago when I graduated law school. But even in that's what guides me into working with the interfaith movement as a spiritual diplomat, going to the conferences, joining a number of councils, and interacting with other leaders from other communities initially for a number of years, albeit very much in a modest capacity, because I abstain from having backing as a sanctioned leader from an established religious community. So my experience in the interfaith movement for much of the 20 years is as it's difficult to kind of succinctly articulate like my role, or how I'm conventionally perceived. In some ways, it may be considered as a lay leader, but then a lay leader from what community? There's a considerable period of my spiritual diplomacy career where I'm formally officially a member of a Jewish community, a Jewish congregation, and do interfaith work from that guise with the leadership of the congregation. And additionally, but still, like, my standing in the Jewish community in a conventional sense is extremely modest. So that's one example. But then another way of looking at my role is as a leader of a nascent spiritual community, which I may be considered at this moment. And so my role is very high up in terms of the hierarchy, but in terms of the general recognition of the community itself. It's like, who, what? So I am many of these. I'm these different. I play these different roles within my spiritual diplomacy, even simultaneously within my spiritual diplomacy over the past 20 years, particularly over the past 10, 15 years. So in these conversations, in the conferences, in the councils, and additionally, there is that an interest of fortifying an experience of community based upon the premise of pluralism, and that's something that's absent from the interfaith experience, in my experience. In that, ironically, in the interfaith movement, the people gathering together from all different types of communities, but at the same time, to simultaneously belong to multitudes of communities is extremely shunned, because that blurs the lines, it blurs the boundaries, and each community, by and large, is very territorial and very concerned about losing members of its own community. And so there are strict protocols about proselytizing, strict protocols about who belongs where, and identifying at the very beginning. So what community you're part of? Okay, boom, there it is. And clear cut, there it is. So when somebody says, well, I'm this and I'm that, it's like, ugh, we don't know which hole to put this person, or pigeonhole. That's a little bit derogatory, but that's a lot of the mentality. Is just like, where do we put this person? So for people, kinfolk, including myself, who come from an experience of being mixed, of genuinely belonging to a multitude of heritages, of genuinely believing, practicing, and teaching teachings from different traditions, it's very uncomfortable for the conventional leadership within the interfaith movement to acknowledge that, to accept that and support that, and to include that within the regular discourse, the regular planning and building within the interfaith movement. So but that's what I look for. Sangha Yosef, this inclusivity individually and then collectively. So, and there are a lot of people, a lot of kinfolk who also look for that. The youth are yearning for that. That's like the standard experience. The youth want to experience, even when coming from being a youth religious leader from their own community, wanting to learn about other people, because there's an increasing propensity towards truth, increasing yearning for truth, and acknowledgement of truth within other experiences and other traditions and other teachings, and amongst youth, that is. And there are many youth who come from mixed heritage experiences, parents from different religious traditions, ancestors from different religious traditions, and wanting to genuinely continue to honor these traditions. And so, and having few options to do that in a genuine way. Very often it's just a matter of identifying and pledging allegiance to one particular tradition, and then perhaps that tradition might have some leniency in some, I won't say wayward adherence, but some eccentric adherence of having some other interests or extracurricular activities amidst the pledge of allegiance to the one community. So that's what I look for during that period of my involvement in the interfaith movement, and that's what I find in Sangha Yosef again. drawing from the different cultures and different experiences. Rasta lives all around the earth, from Japan to Hawaii to Chile, Brazil, Colombia, the land of the Muisca and the Guarani, the Inca, obviously the islands, Europe, Africa, obviously. Rasta exists around the earth, and by the kinfolk, the ethnic kinfolk from each of these communities as well. Even as an Afrocentric, particularly as an Afrocentric spirituality. And that's something else that I miss that I look for in the interfaith movement is recognition of Afrocentric spirituality. Rasta is absent significantly with the interfaith movement, which I become increasingly aware of through the years, particularly as I become increasingly knowledgeable about Rasta. And one thing that might explain it is that Rasta has fewer numbers and has less availability to invest itself in kind of like the talking emphasis within the interfaith movement. I don't mean to sound condescending when I say that's just the actuality. Much of the interfaith movement is just talking, and it's necessary, it's needed. But many communities don't have that luxury of just, they need results. They need, like, we need to do something with our time and effort. So that's one thing on the side from Rasta. And also Rasta knows a lot about the BS tendencies within conventional hierarchies and initiatives, and additionally, and has very strong leeriness towards investing itself, or even just even being proximate with such things. So I'm not applying that to all of the interfaith movement, but it's just a matter of recognizing that it's actually explains like why many of the African congregations, at least in the Western Hemisphere, actually around the earth, don't get involved with the interfaith movement because of the similar reasons. Baptist churches, African Methodist, Episcopal, Zion, generally don't get involved in interfaith movement, at least in my experience over the past 20 years, because again, don't have a lot of luxury and patience to just and then at the same time, from the interfaith movement part of it, including black congregations, whether it's black Christian congregations, black Muslim communities, and Rasta, or Rasta, an interfaith movement or interfaith initiative, a council, a conference, inviting that voice into the proceedings is actually inviting the undoing of the proceedings, because it's inviting the voice of affliction. I mean, much of the interfaith movement talks about affliction and atrocities in a distant kind of way. I'm just saying, oh, it's such a terrible thing. And the quiet kind of messaging is that aren't we glad that we don't do that ourselves? When in actuality, the interfaith movement is built upon the same imperialistic atrocities that the teachings of the religions admonish. But everybody's doing it, so there's little motivation of calling it out. But when bringing in communities that are experiencing that and are charged with calling it out, then that undoes a lot of what is done in the interfaith movement. And there's a significant amount of important connection that's done in the interfaith movement in terms of building and maintaining relationships between religions, and the peace and accord and understanding and learning through the generations. But a lot of it is predicated or guided towards just maintaining the structures of persecution, of oppression, that the congregations or the congregants that support the interfaith movement rest upon. So that's another reason why I maybe consider that Rasta has less historic involvement within the interfaith movement, in my experience. So I look for that. I look for authentic. I look for recognition of the validity, the legitimacy, the value, the treasure from Afrocentric spirituality in my participation in the interfaith movement. And we find it increasingly within our experience with Sangha Yosef. I don't think I have to go into the details about how that is in terms of Afrocentric spirituality as a Rasta community. So that's much of it. Again, this is not a sales job per se. It's like a conversational testimonial, but still even unconvinced about how convincing it may be. It's been an hour and a half nearly, and I'm still confident that I could have likely spent the past hour and a half just wrestling. So this isn't just a matter of me venting and unloading the pontifications. It is intended to be beneficial for recipients, but anyway, I am getting into the rambling zone now. So I'm trying to think what else. Maybe what's beneficial is just to share a summation of the things that I look for during these 48 years of trotting in this life, and finding it within Sangha Yosef. Community, clans is a significant thing. This experience of family, extended families, how it works, a formal, structured way of relationship amidst the families, particularly in the mixed heritage experience. A lot of it within Sangha Yosef is still nascent. We're still learning and discovering, but just that notion of families, our distant families, having a structure through which to continue to respect each other and cooperate with each other. That's something that I strive for so long, that many other kinfolk are striving for as well. The discipline, prayers and meditation on a daily basis, getting to bed at a decent hour, getting sleep, nutrition, eating, veganism. I look for that for a long time. Plants, greens, just knowing what's healthy. Now, I ain't the best. I mean, I put on weight probably, not so much in the past month. I put on weight before that, so it's just a continuation of that. But I ain't the poster child or poster man for like health and fitness, particularly fitness. But at least knowing what that is. It takes a long time for me to recognize that, or to learn that, and to experience it. So even when I'm in my 20s and running on a daily basis and eating salads, many of the salads are just iceberg, and iceberg is beautiful, but it's not the most nutritious necessarily. So I didn't have a knowledge about greens and vegetables and veganism, ital, and additionally. And so I search for that. Herbs, and additionally, and to be honest, that's a significant thing to be aware of as a youngster, particularly adolescence, and at least, and particularly in my experience, where that was my refuge, was junk food, and how I relieved my stress in many ways through overeating, and additionally, and so understanding health and understanding the relationship between physical nutrition and mental health peace of mind, and additionally, and finding further healthy ways to find that peace rather than through consumption, whether it's food, whether it's sex, whether it's clothes, or intoxicants, drugs, alcohol, or whatever else. But for me, it was nutrition. It's food. So, and that continues to be. There's still a thing where I go to for support. So, anyways, this is not a support group meeting. But that knowledge is shared here with Sangha Yosef, and that's what I search for. Prayers and meditation, genuine old time religion experience, rootedness. This is shared within Sangha Yosef, and at the same time, the new time revelation, recognizing the needs and the nuances of today, that are different from yesterday, and speaking to that, not just speaking to, but honoring that, listening to that, drawing from that, learning from that, teaching that. This is included within Sangha Yosef as well. An example of that, Sangha Yosef, a nascent mixed color Rasta community. Rasta itself is comparatively, it's ancient, but it's also nascent as a religiosity, quote unquote religiosity. So I think that suffices that qualification. Nature, relationship with nature, the native experience of honoring our relatives, plants, animals, Mother Earth, Inamaka. This is shared and provided within Sangha Yosef in our Rasta consciousness. So, what else? Again, I said relationship between man and woman. Cats can still call me out on that, and we can have that conversation. But the same cat's got to recognize where I am today is much, 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 much better, regardless of what cats think of me and what I do, what I am, what I say. Still much, 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 much better than what I am 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, even 40 years ago. There's much that I learned painfully about relationship between man and woman, respecting a woman, supporting a woman supporting a man, and respecting a man. That many, many, many youth of many ages, from 8 to 80 and further, need at this moment. This is found within Sangha Yosef. And this is continually learned and taught within Sangha Yosef. So, again, through the narratives, Rivka and Yosef Avinu and Rivka Imotenu, Abraham Avinu and Sarah Imotenu, the narratives, the Buddha, what the Buddha teaches, what Jesus teaches about marriage, having that conversation between, well, should it be celibacy, or should it be single monogamy, or is polygamy acceptable? Knowing all the nuances within these different pathways of relationship, recognizing the legitimacy within each one, the application and relevance within each one, given people's different proclivities and circumstances. So that discussion, that guidance, those narratives, those principles, those guidelines of even just knowing where it is, and knowing that amidst all those different options, again, celibacy, monogamy, or polygamy, that adultery is categorically prohibited. And knowing what that is, that's not just direct sexual intercourse. It's not just improper interactions between man and women. It's not just pornography. It's not just masturbation. It's further. It's a discipline continually. And to know that, so that even when there is a violation of that, to know that, okay, the appropriateness, the necessity of atonement afterwards, and reconciliation and consequence. So that is included within Sangha Yosef. Again, the narratives, the principles, the rules, the guidelines. So I can say, the thought that occurs to me is to say whether it's judgmental or otherwise, because that's one of the things that people say, don't judge. Everything is judged. It's a matter of not condemning. So it is beneficial to judge, to discriminate what is appropriate, what is inappropriate, but not to devalue and dehumanize and unduly subjugate somebody else for violating it. Just say, okay, that was inappropriate. Here's the methodology for atoning for that. Here's a methodology for reconciliation, and further. So that's one of the challenges, particularly amongst young kinfolk, is that extreme aversion towards being judged after having done things that people recognize that probably shouldn't have done, that not necessarily necessary. Even things that seem to be non-victimizing, again, pertaining to sex, pertaining to consumption of intoxicants or otherwise, and because of that, and knowing that other people are doing things that are just so way wrong to each other, violence, extortion, stealing, and everything else like that. So don't judge me for doing things that I did with somebody who was it's all mutual, consenting. And when people do say that's wrong, that's, don't judge. I know that experience. I know that that stance. But I also know that there's a truth beyond that as well. So what I say is that it's beneficial to recognize what is healthy and what is not healthy, what causes that. And when we recognize having done things that are unhealthy to others, when we recognize having done things that are unhealthy to ourselves, to minimize continually doing that, to prevent as much as possible doing it again, but also to make amends when it's to somebody else, saying, yo, that was my bad. It doesn't mean becoming that person's slave and being indebted to that other person for the rest of life and having to do whatever that person says. But it's just like, yo, that was messed up. That wasn't the best thing. My bad. And there it is. And also when we do that to ourselves, acknowledging that and exercising forgiveness, practicing forgiveness, one of the greatest gifts, greatest powers that exist in this universe. So, again, there is judgment. That's just natural. I'm judging that this seat is going to hold me up at this moment. That these lights, these candles are going to continue working, at least for the moment. We make all different types of judgments necessarily in every second. The consideration is not to condemn, not to say, oh, sinner, never, ever again, less than, worse than, lower class, and that challenges some precepts from in a number of different traditions. But we can talk about that. We can we can open the books and talk about that equality, that oneness, the echad and the ek. So, judgment, non-condemnation. And what else as summation with Sangha Yosef? Joy, song, stories, rituals, ethics, the cycles, getting attuned with the seasons, having our rituals, the ancient wisdom that connects our rituals with the seasons, the movements of the earth and the soleil and the moon, and the harvests, and additionally, and the life experiences that are connected with these, and the appropriateness of when to be particularly mindful of our relationship with heaven amidst these earthly experiences, and how we do that collectively as a community, as family, as clan, as village, as a diaspora, and how that strengthens our relationship and support for each other, and also our bond and our cipher with our ancestors, prophets, and sages. That's just rootedness that gives us that stability to weather the storms and further. So, Sabi Yusuf provides that guidance from wherever our ancestors come from on this earth, whatever traditions our ancestors come from on this earth. We have relationship. We honor that relationship. Esoterically and tangibly. Esoterically through the teachings and stories and narratives, songs, the languages. I know all the languages at this moment in the way that people think. I know all the languages. Everybody knows all the languages. If we know silence properly, we know all the languages. But my temporal knowledge of the languages is very modest. But within Sangha Yosef, we have this burgeoning methodology of learning, of study, of education, of communication, of support for each of us to connect and to practice the languages from which we are derived, and the languages that we continue on to our progeny, Elohim willing. There's something else. Oh, and again, that's the esoteric. Then there's the tangible. Our relationship with the earth, the rivers, the lands, the plants, the herbs that we are derived from. We have different combinations of particularly the herbs in the foods, the nutrition, the plants that are part of our heritage, that are part of who we are. That are celebrated within many of these songs and stories, Moliwa, and I'm just thinking the olive trees, Iwaji, and further. So it's a matter of having a collective community experience that makes room for that supports that provides knowledge about this, and encouragement accordingly. It may be somewhat, or may be perceived as somewhat general, of like, oh, you're trying to be everything to everybody. It's a matter of, we already are. That's the earth. But as a spiritual community, we acknowledge this because that's just what it is. That's what the earth is. That's where our peoples come from. And we make it available so that people can identify where people's own respective proclivities are. So if somebody's a mixed heritage and wants to honor the Iwaji experience and learn what that Moliwa is, and additionally because that's what the ancestors are, then here it is. I can go into other plants as well, but the three sisters of this continent, or at least of this region of the continent, squash, beans, corn. We make it available. We support it, and kinfolk can reach towards those offerings that are increasingly proximate with kinfolk's own heritage and interests, and still be recognized and supported as 100 legit part of the community, rather than an outsider with proclivity, or an insider with outsider proclivities or whatever. So there's a methodology of doing that. So identifying what those plants are, and continue to identify that. And not just saying it's all the plants. It is all the plants, but there are certain specific plants, the ashwata, the neem, and additionally, that are of particular note within our teachings, within our heritage, within our practices, within our healing, the hiji, and additionally. So we have this knowledge. Hallelujah, alhamdulillah, Baruch Hashem. Thank God, Jai Om. So that's part of who we are. With Sangha Yosef. So again, the relationship, song stories, rituals, ethics. And that's going to be it. We round this up. Economics, methodology of sharing, making a living. Like, when I look back at my life, thinking about like what I would do, who I would be if I am presented with Sangha Yosef at elementary school level, at middle school level, at high school level. When I'm making these decisions about life, path, career, all this other stuff. And hindsight 2020, all this kind of, I tend to avoid doing those type of things. But there is some purposefulness in me sharing that when I think about that, even at this very moment, I see a very satisfied life in simply working the field. And I don't mean to sound condescending about it. I would be happy just being an agrarian. Genuinely, making furniture. My great-grandfather is a carpenter. Actually earns his freedom from enslavement through his work as a carpenter. That's another story. But so I don't mean to sound condescending, but there is in our society a certain strong bias and discrimination towards different types of labor. My point, though, is that whatever our labor is in this life, when we have a knowledge of self, of the heavenly, and we have a discipline and a love of self, the labor is less, like the type of labor is less significant. It's like whatever we're doing, we're contributing to the cause. We're contributing to this life, to the righteous life, to the community. So, and not only that, we are taken care of. That's our insurance. Is being part of the community, so that when we live in village, and additionally we share, and regardless of what we're doing, we know that our children are going to be educated. Our children are provided with knowledge of self, and shown what discipline of self is, and shared with love of self. So we don't have to worry about getting high salaries and being able to afford private school education and tutors and everything else, and saving up for a university education. We don't have to worry about that, because we're living the life already, and we're connected. We're in relationship with kinfolk who support us, so we can do whatever and not have to worry about stacking up the chips for that eventuality, and thus it doesn't become just a numbers game of like clocking in and seeing how much we got and stacking it up and how much we can save from that day. It's a matter of focusing on what we're doing at the day. I'm about to make this chair. Let me make it quality. I know who's going to sit in this chair, and I want them to be sturdy. So it's not just a matter of like, let me clock this, let me get this chair done and fill out the quota and da 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 da, and there it is. Give me my paycheck. That's not it. It's mindfulness and dedication within the moments of our productivity, so that it's not just being busy on the clock. It's being productive on the rock. But that's a big thing of just like. Now, that being said, I'm precluded from having that same proclivity at this moment. Why? Because I've been bestowed with knowledge, with information, with wisdom, even through my trotting. And now I have a responsibility. I can't just go into the field and be satisfied with doing that at this moment, because one, my muscles, I ain't got the muscles for that to be productive as much as other cats can do. I can build that even at this age of 48. I can still go into the field, God willing, and do things if it's the will of God. But that's not the most productive utilization of what I bring to the table. And what I bring to the table is no better and no worse than whatever anybody else brings to the table. But it's just recognizing that different cats got different skill sets. And after I've been studied and additionally for so many years, I've got a responsibility of sharing that. Because nearly 20 years ago, amidst my affliction of persecution and additionally, when a lot of things are taken away from me, or that when I could make a decision of living a lifestyle that's distant from conventionality, there was a window of re-entry into society, but in a very different capacity, working in a basically wasn't necessarily a factory, but in that kind of capacity, and I continue doing that. But I could see like, yeah, this isn't gonna work. This ain't gonna happen because I already know too much. If I work as a bagger, if I work as a in an entry level position in like a factory, whatever else, I know too much. I know the ways of middle management. I know the ways of upper management. I know the manipulations, and even me being just quiet and this and the other, word gets out, and anyway, it becomes disruptive. The middle managers start to be suspicious and start to like do accusations or put things, obstacles or whatever else to try to trip me up. Then if and when I get through that, then it unseats the middle managers, and the others see it and they say, oh wait, hold on, what's going on here? And then the upper managers so I'm precluded from doing that. And working in the field similarly, like first, who would I be working for if other than myself or other than the village? Again, unseating any hierarchy of giving me a boss, it unseats itself. I'm too further in the game at this point, and I don't mean to sound like braggadocious or whatever, but that's just the actuality. Like the walls start to shake because it's not what I'm supposed to be doing at this moment. I'm supposed to share this, and it happens by the grace of God, one way or the other. Even amidst me being in silence and whatever else, what I share here still gets further voluminous. So, and that's not supposed to be threatening. It's not supposed to be like, again, egotistical, whatever. This is the nature of things. So my point is that in the villages that we cultivate with Sangha Yosef, there is security, there is support, there is learning and study that is shared. And that is what I search for the many years of my life. And many other kinfolk are searching for that as well. Particularly the trust to be able to do that, to be able to share in that way, and the discipline that precipitates that trust, the modesty, the honesty, the accountability, the guidance of how to do that from our ancients, whether it's Menke, or it's Konfuzi, or it's Moshe Rabbeinu, or otherwise, how to build community through these precepts of sharing. What is the discipline that's necessary? How do we mitigate disruptions? How do we reconcile disagreements? And additionally, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam provides these solutions for community, pragmatic solutions. So that's part of what is shared here as well. And also, perhaps unlike this recording of nearly 2 hours, concise. It's actually, that's what I shared earlier today. We've got 10 numbers that basically sum up our methodology. I had a beautiful conversation with a sister and brother earlier this past week on this topic here, the alignment of the chakras and sphirot. So much still to be revealed, so much that is continuing to be revealed just through the coalescence of these teachings and wisdoms. And it's not newfangled inventions. It's ancient reconciliation and guidance that's revealed only through seeing our differences that our teachings tell us within the Quran, even within Torah, within the Gospels, definitely within the Bhagavad Gita, within the Tao Te Ching, and further. So Sangha Yosef is a conduit of these revelations, continuing. And it's not just me. Like, even just looking at reviewing each weekly portion, each portion that's read from Tobati Goka Dao, the topics that are covered, sometimes they can seem amazingly aligned. Like, this one's talking about redemption, this one's talking about reconciliation, this one's talking about returning to Shuva or otherwise. Like, that's the main focus of each one. Like, how can they all be talking about the same thing in the same week? That's not just accident, this and the other. In some ways, yes. In some ways, there might be a little bit reaching. But sometimes it's just like so blatant, like, wait a minute, this is all like they're saying the same thing. That's amazing. From different lands, from different eras, and additionally, like, this is the same thing. That's one type of amazing. And another type of amazing is when, like, it's sequential. Like, this one's talking about conflict, this one's talking about resolution, this one's talking about life after resolution, and additionally. And it's like, whoa, that's trippy. And then another time it's like they're like completely different, or they seemingly completely different topics. Like, this one's talking about trees, and this one's talking about water, and this one's talking about fire. And so, hold up, wait, this all comes together as elements. That was a little bit of an obvious example, but this one might be talking about peace, this one might be talking about diligence in working, and another one might be talking about making pilgrimage. But then when we can like, again, see like some kind of correlation, and that's always going to be like anything that's going to talk about life experience, there's always going to be connection and relationship. But to see even just that venture of thinking about how those things are connected with each other, again, coming from the different things, there are things that are revealed from that exercise, and that's Sangha Yosef. This is the schedule of study. But 10 numbers I mentioned, and I guess I'll conclude with that. I think this is probably best. See if we get this under those hours. yearly calendar of observances. When I talk about conciseness, now that might not seem like a small number of observances throughout the year, but when you think about this represents, not this just doesn't represent, this includes, this is the vast amount of world religions. These are the observances each year. That's actually tremendously concise, and actually doable. And I'm going to just leave it at that. Basic principles. The other thing also is that there's still much flexibility and much room for discovery and conversation within Sangha Yosef as well. There are certain things that are written in stone, literally, that we didn't write in stone. We're just carrying the stones. But then there's also much room for discussion and self. I don't want to say self-exploration because that's a little bit cliche and a little bit too. But there is that, I'll say, questioning, and even challenging, in a modest, deferential way, about what's written in stone, and further, because even what's written in stone is meant to be questioned respectfully. So, that's part of Rasa, and that's part of Sangha Yosef experience as well. So this pretty much covers what we do and what we're about. It's the foundation. So the 10 numbers. I'll just again conclude with that. 34, 18, 12, 5, 16, 10, 6, 40, 16, 8. 34, 34 rivers of the earth. 18, 18 writing systems of the earth. Not just languages, but writing systems of the earth. 12 calendars of the earth. 5 areas of civilization upon this earth. 16 clans, and specifically, particularly clan regions of clans, or clan regions, based upon the regions of the rivers of the earth. 10 holy teachers, and the next number from this is actually 36, but focus on the 10 holy teachers of the earth, the lineages from these teachers. 6 scriptural groupings. So that's Tobare Gokidao. Torah, Bhagavad Gita, Digha Nikaya and Dhammapada, Gospels, Quran, Tao Te Ching. It's a scriptural foundation for studying the earth. It's not all the scriptures of the earth, but it is a solid foundation for studying the vast religiosity of the earth. There are many additional scriptures from each of these groups. Torah has the Talmud, it has the Tanakh, and additionally, the Bhagavad Gita is only an extension of the Mahabharata, which is also is significantly derived from the Upanishads and the Vedas. So that's all one of the groupings. The Digha Nikaya is just one element of the Pali Canon, the 3 baskets, so of the Buddha. So Dhammapada similarly with that as well, but this whole grouping of scriptures. Gospels obviously again comes from the larger New Testament, which is also part of the Bible, and then all the different theological teachings and further that come from the Gospels and around it additionally. So that's another grouping. The Quran obviously has the Hadith, has the Sharia and further, so that's another grouping of scriptures and holy texts. And then the Tao Te Ching, we have the I Ching, we have the classics, Kung Fu Zi, Lun Yu, Ming Ke, the Doctrine of the Mean, Great Learning, and further. So that's another grouping. So, but those groupings cover a vast amount of the geography and religiosity of the earth, and so it's from there that we have a solid foundation for understanding and continuing our studies of the earth. So, and teachings of the earth as well. So that's the seis. Then we go into cuarenta. So cuarenta is the holy texts within our schedule of studies in yearly within Sangha Yosef. So I showed that schedule a moment ago. Here it is. So it's going to be difficult to see immediately in this joint, but there are actually 40 holy texts that are included in that. The Tobadigo that I just mentioned, and then 33 further texts, because actually in Tobadigo Kadao, Dhammapada, and Digha Nikaya are two distinct texts. So there are 33 other texts that we study on a regular basis, either weekly or once a year, and coming from many other additional traditions, to further understand, to learn, to teach the ways of the earth. That's 48. Then we have wait a minute. 16. I skipped that. So 34, 34 rivers. 18, 18 languages. 12 calendars. And again, I'm not going to say what each one of these are at the moment. It's too long for this purpose at the moment. 5 areas of civilization. How did I miss that? 5 areas of civilization. Basically, it's the Mediterranean, the area around the Mediterranean Sea, and then that which is north of it, Europe, that which is east of it, Asia, that which is south of it, Africa, and that which is west of it, the whole Western Hemisphere, known as Mayan Terrania, aka Taino Terrania, aka, for many in the conventional sense, the Americas. That's the 5 areas of civilization. And again, that's just a geographic context to compartmentalize as much as I intrinsically criticize that notion of pigeonholing, compartmentalizing. We have to have some type of lines. We have lines. We need lines, not borders, not boundaries. Anyway, so it's getting late. I'm getting combobbled, but 5 areas of civilization help to contextualize our study of the civilizations of the earth, as I mentioned within the narrative of the rivers. From that, we have 16 clans. So these are 16 clans of the earth. These clans are based upon geographic regions of the earth. Those geographic regions are distinguished by the rivers of the earth. So these are regions of the different rivers. And just observing the lay of the land. Basically, the way it's apportioned is that the basic continents, 3 of the continents are basically the continents are basically divided into 4 sections: northwest, east, and south. And it wasn't intentionally done that way. That's just how we observe the lay of the land, how the rivers flow, and then also what our natural orientation is historically, traditionally, across the traditions: east, west, north, south. So Asia, east clan, north clan, west clan, south clan. There's also a middle clan in the middle, because Asia is huge. And there's a portion, the middle of the continent flows inwards towards the Aral, Caspian, and Black Sea. So that's a distinct region as well. So there are actually 5 regions in Asia. Africa, east, west, north, south, plain and simple. That's 9 total, or running total. Then North America, or the North Quad, the northern continent of the Western Hemisphere. Again, 4, east, west, north, south. So that's 13. Then the southern quad, the southern continent of this Western Hemisphere, 2 regions, north and south. And that's just because the geography, the size, and further helps also concerning memorization and otherwise. So that's 15. And then one other region is the islands. and that's all the islands around the Earth, inclusively as one region collectively. And that might seem anti or counterintuitive or otherwise, but actually it provides some interesting insight concerning the nature of islands, the nature of island nations, the nature of island empires, Japan, England particularly, and that the juxtaposition with the evolution of Earth civilization, or world civilization. So those are the 16 regions of rivers. Those are the 16 clans. There are clan designations according to each of those different regions. So that's the clan system that we work with in Sangha Yosef. And then from that, we also study the respective traditional clans of each of these different regions as well, from Scotland all the way through the tribes of Africa, and the clan system within the Western Hemisphere of native traditions. And additionally, so it provides us with a proficient platform to further study the traditional clan systems, the continuing clan systems of the Earth. So there's that. So that's DS16. Then we go to DS teachers, which I mentioned. Again, there are 10 teachers. There's actually 36 in our focus as well, but 10 is helpful for memorization purposes, and also 10 covers a significant amount of the lineages of this Earth. So I'm not going to say what. I'll say what the 10 are. Abraham Avinu, Krishna Sri Bhagavan, Lao Tzu, Tao Te Ching, Menelik Rastafari, Siddhartha Bodhisattva, Yeshua Rabbani, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Diganawida Gayanashigowa, Martin Luther, Hallelujah, Robert Nesta, One Love. Those are the DS teachers. There's an additional 36 that include the majority of those teachers, and then additional teachers from additional lineages and traditions. So again, it's a framework for studying further. From the 10 teachers, we have 6 holy scriptures, as I mentioned before, Tobati Gokadao. Those groupings of scriptures, again, foundationally to study, understand, teach the ways of the earth. From there, we have the 40 texts, as I mentioned before, again. In addition to those 6 scriptures that I mentioned, which is actually 7, there are 33 additional scriptures that we read and study on a regular basis. Then the next number is DC6. Those are principles of the Welt Ethos. So what Welt Ethos is significantly derived from the Panchasilas that the Buddha teaches: peace, sharing, chastity, honesty, sobriety, as well as the work of Swiss theologian Dr. Hans Kung in the Parliament of the World's Religions recently this century, depending on which calendar you're utilizing, within the past few decades, within this generation, about the same, actually 4 principles. It leaves out sobriety, but the basic foundation of that is shared by the many different traditions of the earth. So these 16 principles that I mentioned are actually building from that and include additional principles: Ahimsa, Ubuntu, Veritas, Haya, Shu, Makahuga, Samadhi, Shema, Shabonu, Narab, Nisaman for academia, Sadaji, Gombaro, forgiveness. Those are the 16 principles. Intentionally drawing from traditional principles from around the earth, respectively. So it's not just a matter of saying, let's just say peace. And how do we say peace in this language? It's a matter of recognizing, like, ahimsa is a sacred, ancient principle and practice and discipline and wisdom from India. Ubuntu is a sacred, ancient principle and wisdom and discipline coming from Africa, particularly Southern Africa, Zulu. So and their stories, their narratives, there's resonance that is conjured in articulating and practicing and studying these principles and the stories around these principles and the teachers of these principles. So similarly for each of the ones that I mentioned, same thing. Each one is distinctly established and providing from their respective traditions. So that's 16. And then the final one is 8, Ocho. Those are the colors of flags of the earth. So when we look at the flags of today, of the different nations around the earth, there are basically 7 colors that are included on these flags. white, yellow, red, black, red. It's red twice. White, yellow, red, black, green, blue, and orange. Those are the primary colors of flags of the earth. If some are to venture to try to find a color that's outside of that spectrum that I just mentioned, you can find that. There are strokes of purple on some of the flags. You can find a brown. Purple you can find, I think, in the Vatican flag. And a little bit, just a little bit, it's primarily white and yellow, actually. The Mexicano flag of the Mayan land, you can find brown there within the hawk, the red and green and white predominantly. And additionally, like there are flags where there's a smidgen here and there of another color, but by and large, those 7 that I mentioned, white, yellow, red, black, green, blue, and orange, are the colors that are prominently featured on the flags of the earth at this moment. And there's significance with that. There's reasons, there's whole traditions and teachings and narratives and principles that are represented within these flags, some to varying degrees of significance and like civilizational relevance, but it's appropriate to recognize that, particularly in an increasingly tangible way of just looking at the way that our teachings are illustrated in simplistic, I shouldn't say simplistic, in simple ways. And this sequence is intentionally shared because when we look at white, yellow, red, black, those are the 4 colors of the medicine wheel within native tradition. So there's intentionality with that sequence, recognizing that all those colors are part of the spectrum. So we just list it in that sequence. The next color is green, which is again one of the basic colors of the flags, and so it's included here particularly because when we look at that sequence that precedes it, white, yellow, red, black, and we add green to that, we recognize that red, black, and green is the tricolors of Pan-Africanism, and so there's that intentionality as well. Particularly the interest of representing the underrepresented and undervalued constituencies within our world civilization, Native African. So, whoop, there it is. Now, that being said, blue is the next color, and blue we can find in many different colors. And I just mentioned those 2 traditions in terms of explaining the sequence. There's so many other traditions that utilize those colors and why those colors are utilized. So blue, it's very easy to see in very many of the colors of the earth. Is included. I can say here at the moment we can go from the representation of the tribe of Israel. We can look at the United Nations. We can look at the Republic, the color of the Republic, the tricolors, and additionally, so blue is in there. At this moment, as I mentioned those, I can also talk about additional prominent colors that are included with the colors that I've already mentioned. We can look at the colors of many of the Arab nations, whether it's, one combination here or there of white, red, black, and green. And so that is included within the aggregate of this sequence. And then also there's colors. I already mentioned the Republic, the tricolors, the France, the United States, England, or not England, but Britain, and further. And then there's also the Bolivarian colors, yellow, red, and blue. So all these are included within it. Now, the one other color that I yet to mention again in this summary is orange. Now, orange is admittedly less prominent than some of the other colors that I mentioned, but it is featured in prominently within a number of the flags of the earth. India, Ireland, Cote d'Ivoire. There's others. I want to say, Netherlands, and additionally. So, there it is. And what does orange signify? what does blue signify? What does green signify? It actually signifies different things according to different traditions. Green is generally recognized as the color of fertility, of prosperity, the herb, the trees, the plants, particularly from agriculture. There's the green and there's the dark green. So that's part of our heritage of this earth. And then the blue signifies water, significantly. Signifies significantly, very often, I should say. It also signifies the sky. It signifies the color of Krishna in certain ways, black, blue, thereabouts. But water is a significant symbol that is represented through the color blue. And then orange, we can look at, again, particularly within India, saffron. And how the saffron robes of the sadhus, of the bodhisattva, and further. So there's an auspiciousness within the color of orange. And then the eighth color in this sequence, or in this group or this list, is gray. And that particularly represents the experience of being mixed, the graying of these colors. And it's not necessarily the intention of graying all the colors, because the colors is beautiful, but recognizing the diplomacy and additionally further within that experience. So that's gray. And gray is other than a specific color that's found in any particular flag of the nations at this moment. But again, it's signifying particularly the mixed experience, and that brings the colors together in a certain distinct, unique, even necessary diplomatic way. Now, just as a disclaimer, and in being inclusive, a note of inclusivity, there are prominent colors and beautiful colors that are absent from this list. Just to name three that I can think of at the moment, that are thought of beforehand, but again are not included within the colors of the flags of the earth prominently. And thus, it's somewhat terse to find a rationale for including otherwise, other than just for the sake of just being further inclusive of a rainbow. That rationale dilutes the intentionality of significance and meaning of that's gleaned from specifically focusing from derivation from the flag. So those three colors: brown, pink, and purple. So those are the 8 colors. Does that make sense? White, yellow, red, black, green, orange. How about we get it right? White, yellow, try again. White, yellow, red, black, green, blue, orange, and gray. So that being said, lightheartedness, colorfulness, we need that as part of our experience of song stories, rituals, and ethics. And that slurring, stuttering, rambling is strong indication of the necessity of wrapping up. Thus is done. Peace and blessings. Blessed love and peace. Alhamdulillah. Ar-Rahmani Ar-Rahim. Allah wabham. Dao ka dao, fei chong dao. Ming ka ming, fei chong ming. Ja Rastafari. Deus nos quies in cele santa facita nomen tuum. Vahe Guru Satnam. Baruch atah Elohim Eloheinu melech haolam. Amen. Kyrie eleison, sevamastu savajigatahi, sabe sata bhavantu sukhitata. Vagabiyam. Aquaba upendo namani, fakiri inesilami, chinta dan perame, libavame umejaka. Ubuntu shubana fakitka. Session Kamasunira, Domo Arigato, Pelama Yellow Wakatoko, Tokodoka Shankun, Gomanagan, God, we thank you for your blessings. Atajamia Yatafanami. Medo, Ahum, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Amen. All thanks and praises belong to the Most High, Elohim Jah Rastafari. Namaste, Assalamu alaikum, Shalom. Mir, Satnam, Jai Jinendra. Zaijian, adios, Che Chaklis. Sayonara, Metta Samadhi, Eshwa Sol, Agape Ke Irini. Esimpe na Asamuje. Kelego Fred. One love and peace. Happiness, liberation.